Butch Jones, right? Jim Harbaugh being in year 3 of his coaching tenure in Michigan, and Butch Jones being in year 5 of his. And the thing that I think is similar, the thing that makes them very similar as coaches, is the way in which they arrived on the scene at their respective schools and what that has done to the expectations of the fans who are following these schools, right? So Butch Jones shows up at Tennessee, right? And Butch Jones does the thing that Butch Jones does, which is that he promises a lot, right? He promises a lot, and then he tries to walk it back later. That's the Butch Jones way of press conferences. And I honestly think that if Butch Jones weren't such an annoying interview, which is to say that if he did not have a penchant for just handing out cliches and seemed more aware of the way in which he presented himself to the media and to the fans, I think Butch Jones has a little bit more leeway and a little bit more give than what he's got. Because right now he doesn't have any. Right? But you could argue that the same thing is true of Jim Harbaugh. Right? Like Jim Harbaugh did it differently, but similarly, right? Jim Harbaugh is a loud guy. Everywhere Jim Harbaugh goes, the story is Jim Harbaugh, right? And the promise of winning and restoring Michigan football is something that Jim Harbaugh was very adamant about and very, very strong-headed about, let's say. And he made some promises that Michigan fans are trying to hold him to. Now, they just got punched in the face by Penn State really, really hard. And that's not even Harbaugh's fault, because at this point, year 3 is not enough to refill everything in the cupboard, right? Like they lost 10 starters last year on defense, 10 starters coming into this season. So there isn't a whole lot there if you're Jim Harbaugh to really hang with the best of that conference. But because you're Jim Harbaugh, because you say all of the things that Jim Harbaugh says, and there's always a story about you, and he's meeting the Pope and giving the Pope a pair of Nikes. Because he's made the show very big, everyone expects the show to be very big. And a similar thing happens with Butch Jones, which is Butch Jones promises an awful lot, and then he walks it back in the form of various cliches. And then there are promises that both coaches made that they didn't really make, but they made them, right? Which is anytime you have a great recruiting class, people take that as a promise that you're going to win some football games. Whether or not that's what that actually means, that's how people take it. So Butch Jones has had a lot of great recruiting classes. Jim Harbaugh, all 3 years that he's been there, has had some really great recruiting classes. And he made the whole big deal about satellite camps and whatever else. People take that as a promise that you plan on winning and winning right away. And they did, right? Like Butch Jones and Tennessee won ahead of schedule. And you could make the same argument for Jim Harbaugh and Michigan. They were ahead of schedule. And this is the part where we get to the psychology of fans. Fans don't like to go backwards. Right? Fans do not like to go backwards at all. And I would say not just fans. Nobody likes to go backwards. If you moved into a mansion and you lived in a mansion for a year, and then you had to move back to your house that you live in now, unless you are not already living in a mansion, you're not going to enjoy that experience. You're not. You drive one of these supercars, right? Somebody gives you a Bugatti. I don't know what all these supercars are just Italian, really. Lamborghini. And then you got to drive your car. You're not going to enjoy that experience as much as you would like. You're not. People don't like to go backwards on stuff. They just don't. Right? Like, that's the reason why a lot of relationships will go bad, right? Like a guy likes a woman and he goes after her and he pursues her. And then once he's got her, he's like, okay, I'm good. And all the things that he did in pursuit, he stops doing. Well, she's not too thrilled about the idea of going backwards on that, right? Nobody likes to go backwards. And so, like, you're ahead of schedule if you're Tennessee and Butch Jones. Like, Butch Jones, year 1 and year 2, like, this was a promising football team. You were winning 8 games. So the next step is to win more than 8 games, right? Like, we knew Tennessee wasn't going to be great this year, but tell you what, it doesn't feel good to look at the prospect of not even reaching 8 games if you include the bowl game. And every week that Tennessee loses, it looks worse and worse. A lot of promises were made. Maybe not directly, but a lot of promises were made. And fans pay very close attention to this stuff. They do. And they look at the prospect of Butch Jones, and they look at him and they go, can this guy take us further? Right? Tennessee has never gotten higher than 22 in the AP polls under Butch Jones. And Tennessee has never won more than 8 games in a season. And so what you're looking at is, can this guy take us further than he has taken us? And in the whirlwind of a bad season, and that's what this is. I know it's 3-4, and certainly people have been worse. But when you look at some of these losses, it is a bad season. In the whirlwind of a bad season, it certainly doesn't feel like it. It does not feel like you can go further with this guy. Right? Like, 5 years is something of a large enough sample size to say, like, if you were going to be any kind of successful at this program, you would have done it already. And I'm looking at Jim Harbaugh and I'm like, wow, it's the same thing. He's 3 years in. He doesn't consistently beat the rivals, right? Important to beat Michigan State, important to beat Ohio State. Right now, it's important to beat Penn State. Doesn't consistently beat those schools, right? They had the miracle to beat Michigan State last year, but they were very close to not winning that one either. And at some point, the fans who are part of great fan bases, historically successful schools, are going to look at this and go, look, you promised a lot. And we'd like those promises to be delivered on. Right? And then you find that you have actually a lot of questions, not nearly enough answers. Right? Like that's what it is. And that's what it's got to feel like if you are a fan of Tennessee football. That is what that feels like. You were promised a lot. You got some of it. It looked like you were going to get more, and now it's getting taken away from you. And I was convinced, well, Butch Jones maybe finishes out the season. Because, like, why would you put an interim head coach in this spot? But honestly, Tennessee loses to Kentucky. I don't know that Butch makes it out of the season. If Tennessee loses to Kentucky bad, Butch doesn't make it out of the season. He simply does not. That's just plain and simple. He won't make it out of the season. Can't happen. My thing is, do I actually think that Tennessee can beat Kentucky? Well, next segment, we've got our SEC rankings. So I will tell you. I'll go from top to bottom to tell you who I think is the class of the SEC and who's the pits. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Which there's an interesting situation, too. And Kentucky, off to a 5-2 start. They got punched and beaten up by Mississippi State, which I don't know why people were so shocked by that. Mississippi State is better than them, right? Like, it's not a secret. All these West teams are better than all these East teams, more or less. Yeah, Mississippi State's better than Kentucky by a lot. Kentucky is not great at playing defense, and if they run up against a defense that is solid enough, they can be stopped and slowed down. Right? Like, I don't know where Kentucky got this idea that they were invincible as a football team, but no, they're very beatable as a football team. They have a very obvious weakness. It's their defense. Yeah, they got pushed around by Mississippi State, and now Mark Stoops is in a position where he could potentially lose some faith from the fan base should Kentucky lose to Tennessee. Because this is the thing. If you're Kentucky, this is a game where you should expect to walk in and beat Tennessee. You should. It's not a guarantee. Now, if you're Tennessee, look, I don't know how you get into the air of these players, but you've got to play this game like your life depends on it. Like your life depends on it. Because your coaches does. Like, his actual career depends on this. Whether or not he is packing his bags Sunday depends on how they play Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on the SEC network, which, to me, this is the game of the week that you want right here, right? Like, for me, the drama is very high. And I think Kentucky football really wanted to be successful this year. This is about the level of possibility. This is about as good a chance as they had to really compete in the East as any time in recent years. You're Mark Stoops. You want to win this game. And you ought to win this game. And if your fans are upset with you because you somehow lose this game, you will deserve it. But Butch Jones is coaching for his life. And that's the problem here. If Butch Jones is coaching for his life and loses this game, even when you really need it against an opponent you can actually beat, because I contend to this day, there was no way Tennessee was ever beating Alabama. And I think we all know there was no way that Tennessee was ever beating Georgia. But again, losing a game that you really needed against Florida when you could have beaten Florida, when Florida's a beatable team for you. Really losing that game against South Carolina when you could have beaten South Carolina. South Carolina's a beatable team for you. I didn't think you'd win, but I thought South Carolina's a beatable team for Tennessee. But they didn't win that game. They didn't win it, and they're going up against Kentucky. How can you justify hanging on to Butch Jones as a head coach when it's a game he really needs against an opponent he can actually beat if he doesn't beat this opponent? And the offense, again, looks anemic. And again, it's talented enough to score points. We've seen this offense put points up on the board this season. If you cannot find the end zone, I don't think Butch Jones makes it out of the weekend with a job. I don't. There's no way. Because you can't justify it, right? And here's the thing. I think that Butch Jones is not a bad coach. I know that this is going to sound horrible. Yeah, I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't. But this is a results-driven sport. And the results just ain't there on any count, by any metric. Where do we find ourselves finishing in the polls? We've never finished higher than 22. How many wins do we get a season? We've never had more than 8 if you count the bowl game. Well, how do we do in conference? We don't do very good in conference. We lose a lot in conference. In fact, most of our coaches' losses are conference games. Okay, well, do we at least beat the rivals? No. We consistently lose to Florida at the end of games. Can't consistently beat Georgia. never even looked good against Alabama. We had 1 year where we looked good against Alabama. Turned the ball over on the last drive of the game. Right? But if you look good against Alabama 1 year, the prevailing thought is that you will continue to get better and you'll continue to challenge and push Alabama. And maybe you don't beat them because most people don't beat Alabama. But maybe you're always in that game, always looking encouraging to the fans. Ever since Tennessee lost to Alabama in that close game 2 years ago, they haven't been close. They haven't been close. Well, that's a regression. That's a step backwards. And people do not like to go backwards, okay? I believe that is the reason why people voted for Trump, right? Make America great again. Well, because the idea is America was once great and now it's not. And y'all didn't like going backwards, right? Like that was the point. Nobody likes going backwards. So nobody likes that early success. And then you regress, but you don't just regress. You regress in a way where you're not even close. You are not even close. I don't know if Tennessee plays in a bowl game this year, right? And we've come a long way from when Tennessee was making the Tax Slayer Bowl against Minnesota and just happy to be there. We've come a long way from there. And nobody wants to go back to missing bowl season. I think the bowl season is overrated. I think it's overinflated. I think we have a bunch of games that don't matter. But while we have a bunch of games that don't matter, you would rather be there than not be there. I mean, that's just plain and simple. You would rather be in one of these nonsensical, the Meineke Car Care Bowl. You would rather be there than not there at all, right? Like the Music City Bowl is what is that? Is it like obligatory that a team from Tennessee play in that bowl game? I feel like they gerrymandered that one, have a team from Tennessee play in a bowl game in Tennessee. But you'd rather be in a bowl game, right? You'd rather be in the worst bowl game than no bowl game at all. Right? Like you'd rather be playing Central Michigan. You'd rather be playing the Richmond Spiders than not in bowl season whatsoever. And that's what we're on pace to do. Because Kentucky should be a team that Tennessee can beat. And the fact that I'm not particularly certain that Tennessee can beat them, that ain't a great sign. It's not a great sign. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, on NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. In a little bit, we are going to go down my top. We're going to rank all the SEC teams in order, basically. Not the top teams, just all the teams. We're going to rank all the teams in order from best to worst. The worst is, at this point, either a surprise or not a surprise to you, like we do every Tuesday. We'll talk about that Monday Night Football game last night because, boy, that Carson Wentz can play. Yeah, Carson Wentz is a baller. And, by the way, he is absolutely here to stay. He's the real deal. He is. And we'll get into some World Series talk tonight. Game 1 of the World Series. I'll give you my opinion on who I got with that later. The Astros and the Dodgers. Dallas Keuchel versus Clayton Kershaw. Who's taking game 1? I'll let you know all that stuff and more. Clutch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com here on 92.7 FM.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
Alfred Hayes Jr. was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated assault a year ago, and criminal court judge Tom Greenholz signed an order requested by attorneys that would put him involuntarily in Moccasin Bend Mental Health Institute for the public good. The statement says he'll be in a restrictive treatment setting for his own safety and for that of the public. He's accused of trying to rape and strangle a 13-year-old girl a year ago. He was 28 at the time. On Monday night, a woman was sitting in her car on Rogers Road. She says a man walked up brandishing a weapon, fired one shot of hot lead into her, and ran away. Lawana Carter, who's 29, suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating, trying to find the gunman. 69-year-old Janice Reaper was killed in a car crash on Lee Highway Sunday night. The driver of the other car involved suffering minor injuries with a juvenile passenger. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
Goss Insurance. Yes, we are local. And no, we don't have an 800 number. In fact, our mobile numbers are on our business cards. We live, work, play, and worship in Chattanooga, and we would love to help with your insurance. Business, auto, home, life insurance. Call now, save money. Call Goss Insurance for all your insurance needs. Goss Insurance, 875-2500. 875-2500.
Nooga Radio, Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4. News Talk Nooga Radio.
Radio, 92.7 FM. You can also check us out on NoogaRadio.com. We're also streaming live on YouTube at this very moment, in fact, at this very moment. So last night, Monday Night Football, I've been on fire with these NFL picks, man. I haven't been wrong in a very long time. I was wrong about the Atlanta game. I thought Atlanta was going to be able to beat the Patriots. I was very wrong about that. Something is deeply wrong about the Atlanta Falcons offense in a way that I've grossly underestimated. They are 3-3. They're still very much alive for showing up in the playoffs. And as we know, you simply have to get there. I mean, how many times have we seen that? We've seen Joe Flacco and the Ravens back in and then catch on fire. We've seen Eli Manning and the Giants back in and then catch on fire. We've even seen the Seahawks back in and then get to an NFC title game. And so we've seen this before. We've seen the Packers. The Packers last year went to the NFC title game against the Falcons. The Packers just barely made it. Needed to win 7 in a row, what it was, to get in. And they got in. So I don't think that we should just say that the sky is falling on Atlanta. But at the same time, something is seriously and legitimately wrong with the Atlanta Falcons. I would say offensively more so than anything. They have not been able to find whatever rhythm, whatever magic it was that allowed Matt Ryan to have an MVP season last year, that allowed Devontae Freeman to be the kind of player that was able to get the contract that he got this offseason. He got a big contract for a back, but he hasn't been able to parlay that into very much this season. And I don't think that they're washed up, right? Like, it's the same offense. And we've seen this. We've seen this Super Bowl hangover happen before, right? Doesn't mean your team's dead, but I don't know what causes it. Like, I honestly don't know. because I know for a fact, and this team is trying harder than they did last year because you want to get back. You want to get that horrible taste of the way that they lost in the Super Bowl out of your mouth. And they haven't been able to put anything together that looks even remotely like last year's team, right? They don't even look like last year's team in spurts. Even when they've looked good this season, they haven't looked anything like what they looked like last year. They've got Julio Jones. He's healthy. They've got Mohamed Sanu. He's healthy. Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, they're healthy. So there's really no what's the name of their tight end, man? Austin Hooper. He's healthy. I mean, like, they're healthy. They're healthy all over the place on offense. So I don't know why it is that they look so anemic and weak, but and it could just be the play calling has changed now. Sarkisian's not as effective as Shanahan. It's hard to tell what the answer to that question is, but they look like a shell of last year, just an absolute shell. That was the only thing I was wrong about this past weekend, and I was not wrong last night when I picked against my own football team, the Redskins, playing on Monday Night Football. And in large part, I picked him because Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is, to me, a legitimate franchise quarterback. He is a franchise quarterback, and you can try and dissect the weaknesses in his game. He does have them. Carson Wentz is by far not the most accurate passer in the league. And Carson Wentz is by far not necessarily the guy that's got the most yards. He's not the best in the red zone. But you know where he excels? He excels in two areas. One, he excels on third down. And it's not even close. Carson Wentz is the best third down quarterback in the NFL statistically. Third down completions and third down percentage. Carson Wentz leads everybody by a country mile. It's not close. But then there's the other level, and this is not a stat, right? But Carson Wentz leads all quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion, in being impossible to tackle. There were 2 or 3 plays in that game where it looked like Washington had Carson Wentz dead to rights. And he escapes. He escapes and he does crazy stuff like throw passes across the field, across his body, off of the wrong foot. He doesn't square up to the receiver, and it's accurate. It's on a rope. I mean, who does this? Carson Wentz is legitimately the best quarterback the Philadelphia Eagles have had since prime Donovan McNabb. And that includes the Vic years. And they haven't been bad since prime McNabb, but he's that good. He is that good. That one play where he was wearing about the entire Washington defense. He's just wearing their entire defense like a shirt, and then bursts out of the pile and runs to pick up, 13 yards in the first down? I mean, the kid can play. I mean, he can really play. He's strong. He's fast, like actually fast, and throws the ball with a level of authority of someone maybe 4 or 5 more years in the league with experience. He's very confident, and he understands what he's doing, and he understands offenses and defenses, and he's able to use his hard count to sort of figure out what's going on with the defense. I mean, the guy's smart. He's a great player. He's a great player, right? Like that he is a bona fide franchise quarterback. And so, yeah, I am a little bit happy that we finally put that discussion to bed, because we had NFL pundits and experts for years and years and years going, oh, no, the sky is falling. We don't have any more quarterbacks in the NFL. It's a crisis. Well, no, this young batch of quarterbacks here, I mean, these guys look good. These guys look good. Wentz and Watson. I like them. I like them. And I wish that Carson Wentz didn't play in my division. Not a fan of that, but, Dak Prescott, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Jared Goff, Mariota. I like them, man. We've got a batch of guys that I think are all capable of being franchise type guys. And they're going out and they're proving it every single week. It's consistent. They're not fading away. They're not going anywhere. I mean, there's a place to build from. We're we're in a world that's going to be a post Brady world soon, and people are wondering where the next stars are going to be coming from. They're here. They're here. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, noogaradio.com. 92.7 FM. So Georgia wins their bye week. And they won their bye week because essentially everyone in the East just imploded. Kirby Smart already delivering the goods. And I've been saying this for weeks, but it's my favorite storyline of college football this year because I would really, really like Georgia to just really break the college football playoff. That would be more entertaining for me, right? Whatever is fun to talk about on this show, that's what I root for. I root for interesting because interesting is easy to talk about. Interesting is way more fun. And Georgia absolutely putting the committee in a bad spot is way more fun. It is insanely more fun. You got to say, man, Kirby Smart delivering the goods at Georgia in year 2. He's ahead of schedule. But he's way ahead of schedule. Right? Like you look at Kirby Smart and you go, well, that guy might just be that guy. Right? It doesn't seem to be fair, nor does it seem to make sense to crown Kirby Smart in any particular pantheon of coaches. But I do think that the SEC has something of a coaching problem. Because I think the 3 best coaches at this point are Nick Saban, Dan Mullen, and Kirby Smart. And you have a bunch of other guys who I think might actually be pretty good. I think Butch Jones, maybe less pressure. Good coach. Kevin Sumlin, we already see how good Kevin Sumlin is with less pressure. Ever since his athletic director came out and said he's basically fired, Kevin Sumlin has so far put together his best Texas A&M season yet. It's just the pressure, man. And I don't know if it's a pressure thing with Brett Bielema and Arkansas. But I don't know. There's some solid coaches that I think are going to find themselves without a job this summer. So that is something of a coaching problem. Whether or not the coaches are good or bad, they're not effective. They're not effective for whatever reason. And maybe some guys are just conference fits, but it's not working out. So you look at Kirby Smart, and he's roughly an aberration here, right? Because you look at Butch Jones year 2, which was okay year 2. Won more games than people thought, but he was all right. Jim McElwain was all right year 2. Will Muschamp at South Carolina, he's in year 2. They're okay. They're okay. They're not bad. They're not bad. But what Kirby's done at Georgia, I mean, it's nothing short of incredible. He's taking a Georgia team that has won historically about 10 games a year and then has them on track to be undefeated. And I look at the rest of Georgia's schedule, and I don't see anybody else that they should lose to. And if Georgia goes undefeated, right, and find themselves in the title game where they're playing Alabama, and they go up against Alabama, and they either beat Alabama or lose to Alabama, but it's close. What does the committee do? What do they do with this? Because I think that's an interesting question to pose. And I don't think anybody, right? Because I say this because the committee's in a tough spot and their job is hard, but I don't think anybody is equipped to have to make the kind of decision that they're going to have to make this year. Things are going to get unnecessarily complicated at the end of this season when you've got so many teams that you could legitimately say, yeah, this team deserves to vie for a title. Because you could say that about Penn State. You could say that about Notre Dame. You could say that about Georgia. You could say that about Miami. With Mark Richt, who used to be the Georgia head coach. I mean, you could say that all over the place. Miami is undefeated. That's one of those rare situations where you let go of the head coach and everything works out for you and everything works out for him. Right? Like the old analogy of who won the divorce. Well, they both did. They're both good. There's so many teams that deserve to be in this playoff that I think we're going to be forced to address the possibility of expanding the playoff. But, and I should say this because I say this all the time, expanding the playoff does not fix the problems of people getting snubbed. If anything, you increase the amount of teams that can be left out. I mean, you don't fix these problems. Expand the playoff. Now you've got to start considering a bunch of 2-loss teams that are also really good and deserve a chance to play. Right? Or a bunch of teams that hail from the Big 12 where the football is just weird. And then you got to put them in there. Which means someone's getting left out somewhere. It's a tough spot. And we knew it. We knew that expanding this playoff was going to lead to this kind of slippery slope. It was only a matter of time. I mean, it only took us 3 years. 4. Now we're here. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. World Series Game 1 tonight. Clayton Kershaw versus Dallas Keuchel, the Astros, the Dodgers. I really don't know where to land on this one. My instinct is to take the team with the better story. But who's got the better story here? I mean, it's been forever since either of these teams have won a World Series. I would say the Dodgers are more well known, and they're their 65-year drought or whatever it is. That's something that everybody's very familiar with them. And then the Dodgers have had their postseason struggles. So on one level, because they have been in the postseason every year, and it's hard on them. They have had struggle after struggle after struggle with this. Right? And we have had to question the legitimacy of Clayton Kershaw as a great pitcher. And can he get it done in the postseason? And we look at his numbers and go, see, the postseason Clayton Kershaw is not as good as regular season Clayton Kershaw. And, obviously that would be true because it's harder to pitch in the postseason. The hitters are all better. But we've seen so many pitchers step up in the playoffs and elevate their game in the playoffs that's something that you want to see. Right? That's a matchup that ultimately you want to see Clayton Kershaw get to be that guy that elevates his game the way that we saw, Madison Bumgarner do a few years ago, where basically he just continued to pitch and it got crazy because you're looking at the guy and going like, dude, why is your arm not falling off of your body? They're pitching you again, and they're bringing you in to be a reliever 2 days after you pitched as a starting pitcher. Now they're bringing you out of the bullpen, and you're still going. Like anytime San Francisco needed somebody, oh, look, I guess we're just going to go with Madison Bumgarner again. And he did it. And I think that, it's not fair. It certainly isn't fair. But I think that that's something that people want out of Clayton Kershaw. I think that they want to see him elevate his game to that level, right? Because we're not asking that of like Dallas Keuchel, right? We're not asking that of Justin Verlander. There are other great pitchers in this series. We're not asking that of any of them. We're asking this of Kershaw specifically because he has had his struggles in the postseason. And because we've seen him in the regular season just be lights out. Right? He's just a force. And then you get to the postseason and you wonder, like, why doesn't he crank it up into high gear to another level? And I will say that pitching is not that straightforward. Not that I have ever pitched, but you watch a lot of it. It's not that straightforward. It's not like, well, let's kick this up a notch. It's sort of like boxing in terms of styles make fights. And I think a lot of the styles that you encounter in the postseason Maybe it's not a great matchup for what Kershaw has. Now, that I don't believe I'm out of my depth there trying to explain all of that. But I do think that we are expecting something in this World Series, specifically from Kershaw, that we are not expecting from the other pitchers in this series. We're not. For better or for worse. Like, I don't know whether or not it's fair, because there is an expectation there across all sports that on the biggest stage, the best players elevate their game. Those are the players that we wind up praising as the greatest of all time, right? Because you could have a legitimate argument as to whether or not, like, Michael Jordan is actually the greatest of all time. But there is a certain level of Michael Jordan got to the postseason, and once Michael Jordan had the teams that would be dominant in the postseason, he put his game on a level you were never going to touch, right? Like, you're just not going to catch that guy. His level of competitiveness is legendary and unrivaled, and he just reached another level, right? Same thing that we give Brady a ton of praise for. There's another level there. And I think we want to give Clayton Kershaw that same level of praise. I think we want to pour those accolades on him. But at the same time, we also want to make him, like, go out there and earn it. And I don't think that he hasn't. I guess it's just a tough spot to be. As to who it is that is actually going to win this series, my gut says LA. My gut says the Dodgers. I feel like they score more consistently. There was a point there between the Astros and the Yankees in the ALCS where Houston, they couldn't hit anything, right? Like the game 6 and game 4 specifically. I mean, the bats just died for Houston. I'm not sure what happened. Like, the just offense was not there for them, right? Like, the pitching wasn't horrible, but like, just offensively, they weren't there. And then New York came to life, and that wound up being more of a series than I mean, anybody anticipated, that I anticipated for sure. But I don't know what it is with Houston, but sometimes they struggle to score. Like, they really struggle. And it's not, well, we're struggling and we're scoring 1 or 2 runs. They're struggling and they're not scoring at all, right? They're just getting blanked in games. That's not something that can happen at the World Series stage. At this level, especially since the Dodgers have not shown that scoring is a problem for them. Scoring seems to be something that they do very well. And by the way, Yasiel Puig, who was once upon a time a Chattanooga lookout, by the way, Yasiel Puig has been having some kind of a postseason, right? And as much as people don't like Yasiel Puig because he's a jerk and because he's a diva, right? Like, everyone that was here in Chattanooga had problems with Yasiel Puig. I mean, he's kind of a jerk. He's kind of a jerk. He hit a home run, I believe, in the previous series and had a bat flip to end all bat flips. But I like him. I don't know. There's something about the guys that are jerks, and they understand that they're jerks, and it's just part of what they do. I am okay with it in a way that I am not typically okay with that. But I like him. He's fun. And so far as being an all-star goes, yeah, Puig. Because I remember that the Dodgers were trying to get Yasiel Puig about 2 years ago. They were trying to get him on up out of there, man. Because he was just hard to work with. He was an absolute headache. But he's too talented to not play. And now here they are, and I can't imagine. I don't know how they're going to fit all of those people, plus Yasiel Puig's ego in the building. Like, I'm actually not sure if everyone can fit. But it's going to be fun. And part of it is that he's going to make it fun by doing exactly the jerk level things that baseball people do not like, right? Like, we do not like bat flipping, but he is going to do a ton of it, right? We do not like trash talk and disrespecting pitchers. Understand that if there was a prop bet that Yasiel Puig would do all of those things, you might as well take the bet that he would do all of those things. There's no way that he doesn't. None whatsoever. But they all score. But I think the Dodgers score more readily and more easily than the Astros do this, but I'm leaning towards the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers will. Granted, because when Altuve is hitting well, it's hard to stop Houston. But there were 2 games in the last series where he vanished, and that bothered me. Absolutely vanished. If there's anybody that we're going to be holding to the, hey, elevate your game, if we're going to be holding anybody to that, I would say the possible AL MVP, maybe that guy. Maybe hold him to that standard, not Kershaw. But anyway, Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. We're going to talk about the best and the worst of the SEC next.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
Alfred Hayes Jr. was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated assault a year ago, and criminal court judge Tom Greenholdt signed an order requested by attorneys that would put him involuntarily in Moccasin Bend Mental Health Institute for the public good. The statement says he'll be in a restrictive treatment setting for his own safety and for that of the public. He's accused of trying to rape and strangle a 13-year-old girl a year ago. He was 28 at the time. On Monday night, a woman was sitting in her car on Rogers Road. She says a man walked up brandishing a weapon, fired one shot of hot lead into her, and ran away. Lawana Carter, who's 29, suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating, trying to find the gunman. 69-year-old Janice Raper was killed in a car crash on Lee Highway Sunday night. The driver of the other car involved suffering minor injuries with a juvenile passenger. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Power Hour News at noon and 9 being brought to you by Greg's Sandwich Works, featuring the best cuts of meats for your sandwich. Greg's Super Spuds, wraps and the most delicious salads in Chattanooga. Greg's Sandwich Works, 6337 East Brainerd Road, Chattanooga.
As an independent agent, Goss represents more than 50 of the leading companies. Goss does the shopping and you save. Goss Insurance for your auto, business, home, and life insurance. 875-2500 Goss Insurance.
Hey, dude, check this out. Have you ever seen one so big?
Whoa, look at the size of that.
Look at this little itty-bitty one.
Wow, that's really small.
They have them big, small, and everything in between. You'll always find the biggest variety of knives at the knife shop at Frost Cutlery in Ottawa. We're talking about over 40 brands of knives, including Benchmade, WR Case & Sons, Booker, and all the Frost Cutlery brands. Now, Sam, you've been to the cutlery shop. Is it amazing?
Spectacular. The knife shop at Frost Cutlery in Ottawa. They have knives, swords, kitchen knives, ammo, and reloading supplies, plus survival gear.
It's the knife shop at Frost Cutlery, open 7 days a week. Hey, girls, you're going to love this. We're going to the knife shop.
Hey, let's not tell them they have ammo and loading supplies.
The Knife Shop at Frost Cutlery opens 7 days a week. You'll always find the biggest variety of knives. You're going to love the Knife Shop at Frost Cutlery in Ottawa. The Knife Shop.
And tell them David Tulis sent you.
Hi, this is Eric Felton. Taxes, accounting, business advice. I've got a neat brochure, 12 ways to improve your business profits. Come on by for a free consultation and we'll give you a copy. E.J. Pelton Company, 332-3339.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Watch it gush out of your TV. Rick Davis is on national TV. Wow. Golden diamonds, coins, and more riches. Rick's selling, Rick's buying, and he's on national TV. Watch him Wednesday, 11 p.m., right after the Judy O'Neill Talk Show. North Georgia Cable TV 265. You won't want to miss it. It's a mountain of cash, cash, cash. And it's catching the Hollywood spotlight. And if one day hasn't got your head spinning, how about a second? Rick Davis is on Fridays, Channel 12, 10:30 a.m., right before The Price is Right. You gotta see it to believe it. Wednesday, 11 p.m., North Georgia Cable Channel 265. Friday, 10:30 a.m. on TV 12. 2 big shows every week. Rick Davis Golden Diamonds. You know where it is. Brainerd Road, Chattanooga. Cash, 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 and more cash.
If I were a rich man.
Hey, Mom.
Yes, Summer.
I know what I'd like to do for Christmas this year.
What would you like to do?
Take shoeboxes full of goodies to the homeless military veterans.
What would go into these shoeboxes?
Toothbrushes, toothpaste, dental floss, deodorant, chapsticks, shampoo, soap, hand warmers, hand sanitizer, socks, gloves, toboggans, small Bibles, blankets, snacks, and cough drops.
Where can people donate these items?
Alpine Crest Elementary School, Sonic on Hickson Pike next to Frontrunner, Chick-fil-A in Northgate Mall in Hickson, and Nooga Radio below Goss Insurance across from Bojangles on Hickson Pike.
When will we distribute the shoeboxes?
On November 10th from 11 to 12:30 and December 15th from 10:30 to 12:30 at the Community Kitchen on East 11th Street, downtown Chattanooga. Please help us in donating these items for our shoebox campaign. No veteran should ever go homeless.
Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
WBLZ HD4 Ottawa, W224AZ Chattanooga,
92.7, digital FM 95.3 HD4 Chattanooga.
Arizona's Jeff Flake cites presidential behavior when announcing his decision.
My service in the Senate will conclude at the end of my term.
A federal appeals court grants an undocumented teen in Texas
the right to an abortion in the United States.
This is the CBS World News Roundup Late Edition. I'm Dave Barrett. Senators from Arizona and Tennessee have come forward to express displeasure with the president. Here's White House correspondent Stephen Portnoy.
In announcing his first term will be his last, Arizona Republican Jeff Flake told colleagues,
"The impulse to scapegoat and belittle threatens to turn us into a fearful, backward-looking people."
Earlier, Tennessee's Bob Corker, also not running for re-election, said history will most remember the president for debasing the country. White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders says it'll be Mr. Trump's accomplishments that history will recall.
Those are the things that people actually care about, not some petty comments from Senator Corker and Senator Flake.
Stephen Portnoy, CBS News, the White House.
Mr. Trump went to Capitol Hill today, had lunch with Senate Republicans, including Mitch McConnell.
We're going to concentrate on what our agenda is and not any of these other distractions.
Tax reform is one of the issues discussed. There's resistance to the plan from New York Democrat Chuck Schumer.
Untruth 1, it's aimed at helping the middle class. Untruth 2, it's not a plan for the rich. Untruth 3, this plan is a disaster for America.
House Speaker Paul Ryan faced reporters today.
All this stuff you see on a daily basis on Twitter this and Twitter that, forget about it. Let's focus on helping people, improving people's lives.
It's possible the House may vote on a budget that could then lead to tax reform discussion in committees. In the Senate this afternoon,
Mr. Alexander, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett.
Members did pass a $36.5 billion disaster aid bill, 82-17 the vote, and this would provide cash for Puerto Rico plus money, $16 billion, to pay out federal flood insurance claims. The ruling by a federal appeals court in D.C. was 6-3 in favor of a teenager in Texas one who's held there, an undocumented immigrant who is seeking an abortion. Here's CBS's Bill Rakoff.
The full court says that the 17-year-old girl should be able to obtain an abortion immediately despite objections from the Trump administration. The Department of Justice had argued against having to provide transportation to facilitate that procedure. Last week's ruling by a 3-judge panel from the same court had given federal officials till the end of the month to try to secure an independent guardian for the girl.
And now, says senior legal analyst Andrew Cohen,
the big question now is whether the Trump administration will appeal this order to the U.S. Supreme Court to try to get the justices in Washington involved. And if so, whether the high court will be interested in getting involved.
On Wall Street, the Dow closed at another record high, 23,441 after a gain of 167. The NASDAQ rose 11 points and the S&P was up 4. Now this.
I'm Jay Farner from Quicken Loans. The rate today on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 3.875%, APR 4.05%. But choosing the right mortgage lender involves so much more than just a rate. Only Quicken Loans has earned 11 J.D. Power Awards. No other lender comes close to that level of client satisfaction. And we invented Rocket Mortgage. It gives our clients a simpler, hassle-free way to get a mortgage completely online in minutes. No one else has anything like it. And our people, each one of our 17,000 plus team members throughout Detroit, Cleveland, and Phoenix provides absolute client satisfaction each and every day. So why would you go anywhere else to get your mortgage? Go to America's #1 online lender. Call Quicken Loans today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com for the best mortgage experience on earth. That's 800-QUICKEN.
Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Uranium from this country was sold to a company in Russia. None of that was shipped, but now the House Intelligence Committee has questions. New York Congressman Peter King.
It's important that we find out why that deal went through. And certainly in view of recent allegations have been made or recent questions have been raised, it's essential that this investigation, this inquiry go forward. It'll be done in full coordination with government oversight.
After the recent killings of 3 people in the Seminole Heights neighborhood of Tampa, CBS's Omar Villafranca says the search is on for a suspect.
Last night, there was a community meeting with the mayor and the chief of police, and the chief of police basically said they have to consider everyone a suspect because they do not have any big credible leads at this point. So they're hoping there's a break in this case that comes from somebody who may have seen something.
Lots of storms in the Carolinas means lots of cleanup today. Duke Energy says this afternoon more than 54,000 customers remained without power. You're listening to the CBS World News.
3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news. Now,
Alfred Hayes Jr. was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated assault a year ago, and criminal court judge Tom Greenholz signed an order requested by attorneys that would put him involuntarily in Moccasin Bend Mental Health Institute for the public good. The statement says he'll be in a restrictive treatment setting for his own safety and for that of the public. He's accused of trying to rape and strangle a 13-year-old girl a year ago. He was 28 at the time. On Monday night, a woman was sitting in her car on Rogers Road. She says a man walked up brandishing a weapon, fired one shot of hot lead into her, and ran away. Lawana Carter, who's 29, suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating, trying to find the gunman. 69-year-old Janice Raper was killed in a car crash on Lee Highway Sunday night. The driver of the other car involved suffering minor injuries with a juvenile passenger. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM. Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com, hour number 2 of the show. I still have to give you the best and worst of the SEC, and I will do that. But let me talk about ESPN for half a second, because ESPN had a show called Pardon My Take that was part of it was a podcast that is affiliated with Barstool Sports. And Barstool Sports has had a history of, posting things on their website that many people would deem to be sexist and misogynistic. And, I can very much see that, right? Now, Barstool Sports is catering to their audience who likes that kind of stuff. And they're allowed to. And if the audience is there for it, they're not doing anything illegal, right? But where the issue just came in is ESPN acquiring them, right? Which is a little bit different from ESPN's typical audience. But ESPN is trying to grow their audience in this world where TV matters less and internet presence and social media matters more. And say whatever it is that you want about Barstool Sports, they certainly have mastered the internet social media aspect of this, right? And so that was something that they were hoping to add on, because if you're good at that and you're good at monetizing that, you're going to be all right as a media company. So it was a smart business decision for ESPN to make. One of ESPN's employees, Sam Ponder, had a huge problem with this because she does not like the misogyny and a lot of the stuff that Barstool Sports does stand for. And Barstool Sports, the CEO of Barstool Sports, and Sam Ponder have gone back and forth on Twitter, not just recently, but going back a very, very long time. And so this was starting to become an issue. To me, I didn't think it was an issue. I thought she pointed out what was wrong with Barstool Sports and what was wrong with ESPN acquiring them. It actually drove interest to the show, because now you want to check it out and see what it's about. Like, are these guys really that bad? Or is she overreacting? Or maybe is this some different part of Barstool Sports than, maybe it's a small part of Barstool Sports and not all of Barstool Sports. I mean, there's a lot of things there. So you wanted to check it out. It actually drew interest to it. And then ESPN canceled it. And I'm scratching my head on this one. I understand why you might cancel it. My issue here is that ESPN is so concerned with what everybody thinks, they're not making any decisions for themselves. Right? Like, for me, I am not a supporter of sexism and misogyny, but who publicly is, right? I'm not. But once you acquired them and you made the decision and you've done your due diligence and you know what they are, then make a decision and stick with it, right? Like, do what you're going to do. Don't just pander to people in an attempt to not offend anybody. Like, what kind of way is that to live? But that's what they did. I mean, they canceled the show after only 1 week of being a part of ESPN. The host of the show is the guy that's actually defended Sam Ponder in the past. And so it just is a weird thing. The ESPN, they're trying to do this, and I felt like they did this with the whole Jemele Hill thing too, right? Initially, she said what she said about the president, and they didn't suspend her because they didn't want to offend, I'm assuming, a large part of ESPN's audience that is black. And then Jemele Hill said some more things, this time about Jerry Jones and about the Cowboys and about their sponsors specifically, and talked about boycotting sponsors specifically. So ESPN did suspend her in an attempt, I imagine, to appeal to their the more conservative side of their fan base. Like, I'm not entirely certain what ESPN is doing, but all I know is that they are trying very hard not to offend anybody. They are trying really hard not to offend anyone, and it's not really working. Like, if we're going to be completely honest about it, like, it's not particularly working. They're trying their absolute best not to offend anyone at all. And in the process, I don't think they're offending everyone, but they're not ingratiating themselves to anybody. And when I first started doing sports radio, I had a mentor of mine tell me that the one thing that you don't want in talk radio, like forget sports for just a second, like the one thing you don't want in talk radio is for everybody to like you. You don't want that, because if everybody likes you, nobody loves you, right? If somebody loves you, then there might be people that hate you, but you'd rather have those extremes than just be waffling around in the middle. And so that's what I think about this. I mean, it just looks like they're trying not to offend anybody at all. We want everybody to like ESPN. And I don't think that that's the way to go. I think you're going to have to run the risk that some people hate you a lot and say, this is what we stand for. This is just what we are. Right? I mean, you can see it. I remember reading a blog from this dating website, the dating website OkCupid, and they used to do blogs on their analytics, you know, and people would rate, you know, potential partners on the dating website. And some, you know, you want to be rated closer to a 10 and further away from 1. But they said, here's something, though. Sometimes it's better to be a 5 than a 7, right? Because you can be a 7 and everybody rates you a 7, right? Everybody comes by and they go, yeah, you're pretty good looking. But if you are somebody with a personality, right? Like maybe you've dyed your hair. Maybe you just, I don't know what you do, but maybe you're somebody and everyone can see your personality. And 5 people think you're a 10 and 5 people think you're a 1. That's better, right? So maybe your average comes out to you being a 5, but the 5 people that love you, and the 5 people that hate you. But then you know that there's at least some extreme that you can head towards, right? It doesn't mean that you're necessarily average. It means that on average, there are about as many people hate you as love you. And that's better. You can't please everybody. And I don't know that this is going to work out for ESPN. And the reason why, to me, this is important is because ESPN is the worldwide leader in sports. They still are. And if they don't handle this transition to a more social media focused online presence, if they don't handle that transition very well, then you know what's going to happen? Do you know what's going to happen? The rest of us are either going to fill in that vacuum and void, or we're all going to suffer because everyone's going to go, oh, sports is dead. So I'd like them to get this right. That to me, I think, is actually very, very important, because it does affect the entire industry. You got to pick something. You got to say, this is what I am. People love me, people hate me, but don't try and please everyone, right? Like I on this show, I'm not trying to please everyone. I hope that everybody listens, right? I hope that everybody finds it interesting, but I don't hope that everybody walks away happy. That's not the plan. Some of you are not going to like me, and that's fine. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM, just so long as you stick around and listen. So I'm going to give you, speaking of things in which some of you will not like me, I will give you my best and worst of the SEC. I've ranked all 14 teams in the league, and this is my opinion on who I think is the best, and I've ranked them from best to worst. Some things may be predictable. So number 1 is Alabama. Every week we could probably sing the accolades of Nick Saban in Alabama, but at this point, what is the point? They are dominant. They dominated again. They did what they do, man. They're the best team in the nation, very much for a reason. Next, Georgia. Georgia's still the second best team in the SEC. They are surprising in how dominant that they have been, but it's not surprising in terms of the talent that they have on that roster. They're maximizing it. Kirby Smart is a pleasant surprise as a year 2 head coach. And Georgia didn't play last week, but continuing to struggle is only good for the Bulldogs. Auburn is number 3. I thought they played last week really well. They have been inconsistent throughout the season. But one thing has been very consistent, which is that they can really run the ball. Keon Johnson is a monster of a running back. And that they don't seem to have any particular struggles defensively. Like, they're a very, very good defensive unit. They did have that choke job a couple of weeks back against LSU. I would say that the whole team choked, not just Auburn specifically. Auburn beating Arkansas 52-20 this past week. LSU is 4th to me. They are 6-2. They beat Ole Miss 40-24. I still have them behind Auburn because of their quarterback situation, which is that Danny Etling is in fact their quarterback. And until anything around that changes whatsoever, it's going to be problematic for them to consistently win the football games that they need to win, which is why they struggled against Troy, in large part because the offense failed to get going early enough in that game. And it did eventually get going. I don't want people to think that LSU had a dead offense in that game, but it was certainly dead in the first half. And by the time they got going, and they actually did have a chance to win the game, but by the time they got going, it was far too late. But LSU is the 4th best team in the SEC. Mississippi State is 5. They beat Kentucky 45-7. They are a very talented football team. I would say, I mean, again, talented relatively. They are getting the most out of the talent that they have. They don't have the best recruiting classes year in and year out, but I do think that Dan Mullen is one of the best 3 coaches in the league. And I think that when you go up against a school like Kentucky, you plan on beating them in a shootout. But Mississippi State's actually really good defensively. Again, not against some of the more elite schools in the league, but certainly when your quarterback is predictable in the way that Kentucky and even LSU's have been, those are the schools that Mississippi State very easily pushes around. They're the 5th best team in the SEC. Number 6 is Texas A&M, who also did not play this past week, but they've been playing very well. They've only got 2 losses this season. Nobody saw that coming for them. They really just one really bad half away and one or 2 lucky plays, in fact, away from beating UCLA to start the season, and then they're only a 1-loss team. They're 5-2. They play Mississippi State next week. So that should be a very interesting game. Mississippi State is only a 1.5-point favorite on the road. That's going to be, I'm actually excited to see where that's going to go. But Texas A&M has been putting together a very, very good season. And last week, got a rest week. Kentucky is number 7 to me. They didn't play well against Mississippi State this past week. They're 5-2. But overwhelmingly, Kentucky's offense has consistently shown up game in and game out. They play Tennessee next week, and that's going to be a make-or-break game, I think, for Mark Stoops. I think that he is the kind of coach that you look at him and you go, A, we're not sure if he's good or not. And B, can we do better than him? My answer to that is Mark Stoops actually is a good coach. And no, I don't think you can do much better than him if you're Kentucky. I think it's very interesting that Kentucky has somehow seemed to forget that they were very bad at football for like half a decade. And now they are somewhat relevant and are looking at moving on from their coach. Like 5-2 is really good for the Kentucky Wildcats on a football field. They're not good typically, but this year they were even considered a dark horse to win the East. I don't think that can happen because I don't think that Georgia's going to lose enough games to make that possible. But can they beat Tennessee next week? They absolutely can. Next is Ole Miss, number 8. They did get pushed around and beaten up by LSU. They're not a particularly good football team so far as being in the SEC goes, but in large part, that has to do with playing in the West, where you're playing a lot of these very dominant teams, and you bounce from one week in playing Auburn to playing LSU the following week. At some point, you're going to get run over by Alabama, and it's all on your schedule. So I don't blame Ole Miss for a lot of the beatings that they've been taking. And Shea Patterson still impresses me every week. He makes 1 or 2 great plays that impress me. I'm very impressed with the guy as a quarterback, and I think that Ole Miss has at least a decently bright offensive future, provided that they can get the right coach in there to take advantage of that. That's actually, I think, a very good job if you're a coach that wants to come in. because they're not going to punish you necessarily for the previous NCAA violations. And you've already got a built to go ready quarterback right off the presses, basically. Number 9 is Florida. Florida, record-wise, is a winning football team. So I suppose I have to put them at 9. But every time I watch Florida, and they did not play last week, but they do play Georgia this upcoming week, and I expect that one to get very ugly. The Dogs are 13.5-point favorites, but I expect that one to be much uglier than that. Because I expect Georgia to be very fired up about the prospect of beating Florida. It's been a very long time since they have beaten Florida. Pretty much nobody on that team was there the last time that they did beat Florida. And Georgia is now in a position to absolutely steamroll the Gators. They've got a very strong, stout, oppressive defense, and Florida struggles to score points. They're the most painful offense to watch in college football, in my opinion, this side of Tennessee. And I don't like watching them play. Like, I just sit down and watch them play, and my eyes bleed. They somehow win, so they're 3-3, so they're not a horrible football team, but they're not beating anybody good. They're not beating Georgia next week. Number 10, I've got Vandy. They're 3-4. I know that there's not such thing as like a good like moral victory, but like they're a good 3-4. Like they're playing around to the expectation that we had of them. And yes, they get beaten up a lot. There's a lot of the teams in the SEC, but they have capable offensive players and they have capable defensive players. And by every metric, they are a better football team this year than they were last year. They simply do not have the talent, but I like Derek Mason as a coach. I think he's doing a very good job with the football team. I just think that they need to figure out how to steal 1 or 2 top-level recruits at key positions the way that, you know, a lot of these Division II CS schools do. Right? Appalachian State is the champ at this, by the way. They do a very good job of recruiting who they can recruit, but every now and then they'll steal a 5-star or 4-star from somebody, and then they've got talented players at pivotal positions. I understand Vanderbilt has lost 4 weeks in a row. To very, very good football teams. I don't think that they should have lost the way that they did to Missouri, but Missouri does this thing where they just wake up and just drop points on you. I don't know what more you can do about that if you're Vandy. South Carolina is 11 for me. Again, I understand all of the problems with South Carolina. They're inconsistent offensively, but somehow they're 5-2. And I think you have to respect that. Granted, they have feasted on some inferior competition, and they beat Tennessee when Tennessee really had the talent to beat them, but Tennessee isn't beating much of anybody playing the way that they are currently playing. South Carolina is at 11. Number 12 is Missouri. Missouri's defense never shows up for a game, has not seen a game this season in which they felt that they can apparently impact worthy of the time to spend showing up for the game. I haven't seen one game where Missouri has stopped anybody. Even when they've stomped out bad schools, they've given up a lot of points. A lot. They beat you by outscoring you. If you get into a track meet with Missouri, there is no guarantee that you are going to win that football game. Missouri is currently 2-5. They play UConn, who's 3-4. They are 12.5-point favorites in that game. I do expect them to blow out the Huskies because they are a powerful defensive unit. Drew Lock is a great quarterback in terms of running that system. They just are limited defensively. And that's the reason why I can't put them much higher than that. Arkansas is 13. Arkansas is disappointing me, man. I like Brett Bielema a lot. I think the talent on that team, I like Austin Allen at quarterback. I think the talent on that team is better than the 2-5 record that they are currently holding. And yet, here they are holding a 2-5 record. And if you're going to underachieve at quite that level, guess what? I can't give you props. I can't give you credit if you're Arkansas there. You are 13th. You are second to last, which Tennessee. I have Tennessee last. I have Tennessee last in the whole SEC. And the reason why I say this is because I'm not certain that Tennessee plays any team in the whole SEC next Saturday that they can beat anybody in the whole SEC. I'm not certain. And their confidence is at an all-time low. My confidence in them is at an all-time low. And Like, honestly, they seem to regress each and every week. Each and every week. You got a matchup against Kentucky coming up next week, and I'm not sure Tennessee's better than Kentucky. I fully expect Mark Stoops and Kentucky to have the advantage. Now, here's the thing. Don't get blown out. Butch Jones might be walking home on Sunday. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, and NoogARadio.com.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Alfred Hayes Jr. was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated assault a year ago, and criminal court judge Tom Greenholz signed an order requested by attorneys that would put him involuntarily in Moccasin Bend Mental Health Institute for the public good. The statement says he'll be in a restrictive treatment setting for his own safety and for that of the public. He's accused of trying to rape and strangle a 13-year-old girl a year ago. He was 28 at the time. On Monday night, a woman was sitting in her car on Rogers Road. She says a man walked up brandishing a weapon, fired one shot of hot lead into her, and ran away. Lawana Carter, who's 29, suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating, trying to find the gunman. 69-year-old Janice Raper was killed in a car crash on Lee Highway Sunday night. The driver of the other car involved suffering minor injuries with a juvenile passenger. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogARadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
Goss Insurance. Yes, we are local. And no, we don't have an 800 number. In fact, our mobile numbers are on our business cards. We live, work, play, and worship in Chattanooga, and we would love to help with your insurance. Business, auto, home, life insurance. Call now, save money. Call Goss Insurance for all your insurance needs. Goss Insurance, 875-2500. 875-2500.
Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4. News Talk Nooga Radio.
You're listening to Nooga Radio, NoogARadio.com, 92.7 FM, Clutch with Keon Rose. I cannot believe we are doing this already. Is the NBA season even 1 week old yet? I think it is exactly 7 days old. And we have already crowned the Oklahoma City Thunder as the King Slayers in the West. See what I did there? Game of Thrones reference, because it's King Slayer. He's the king. Jamie Lannister is the King Slayer. So we've already done this. We've already done this with the Thunder. Somehow, look, I will acknowledge this about the Thunder. They look good. They look really good. And I hope that they play the Warriors in a Western Conference Finals. That would be amazing. It would be fantastic. They're a very loaded team. And I think that Sam Presti deserves a ton of credit for putting together a team that can once again compete in the West after losing Kevin Durant. He was without Durant for 1 year, and he's already put together a roster that can compete, right? By taking risks, by taking a risk and bringing in Paul George, by taking a risk and trading for Carmelo. But it's working right now, right? Now, I want to see what happens when the season gets in, into the middle, and maybe they go through a little bit of a slump. Can all of these guys work it out and work through it? That, to me, is also important and would be ultimately telling of how good this team can actually be. But I was reading stuff that, here come the Thunder, and they won a game yesterday. It was a clutch performance, and the way that they won the game late, a lot of people seem to think is indicative of how this team is going to work in high-pressure playoff situations. For one, I'm not a stranger to firing up the hype train. Very frequently, I will hop on board something, I will fire up a hype train, and then I'm forced to stick on the train, right? But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's not go crazy with how well the Thunder are going to do in the playoffs. Let's extrapolate how they're going to do in the playoffs based on how they're playing. First off, they lost the game. I understand that we want to see how good they're going to be in clutch situations, but let's start there. They lost the game. They played the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are not terrible, by the way. They're very fun to watch team. But they lost the game. That's one. And two, what is that, the third game of the regular season? How are we going to make extrapolations about the playoffs based on the third game in the regular season? I'm sorry, but there's a reason why we call the NBA playoffs the second season. It's because A, it takes for freaking ever to actually finish, and B, it is the place where you make the money. So, look, I understand that we expect a lot out of the Thunder, but the season is young. We've got a whole 79 games left, and we're not even halfway through. Like, there's no way to positively gauge who is good and who is not good in this new NBA just yet. Right? The cream has not yet risen to the top. Right? Like, there's some teams that look very, very good. There's some teams that look average that we know are going to be good, right? Like, the Warriors are 2-2. But we know darn well they're not going to stay 2-2. Right? The Bucks are 3-1. Giannis looks like the real deal. We'll see if the Bucks can stay winning that percentage of games. I think it is unlikely. As much as I like Giannis. But that's crazy, right? Like, that's an absolutely insane situation. Like, we are just ready to just give it to the Thunder and just say, hey, these guys, they are the top of the league. They are the ones who can dethrone the Warriors. Maybe they can. But let's get a little further in than 3 games. Let's get a little further into this NBA season than 7 whole days before we start making crowning decisions. What on earth are we doing at that point? Like, seriously, what are we doing? Clutch with Keon Rose on NoogaRadio.com. Let's talk Kentucky. But Kentucky hoops this time, because John Calipari is a guy that seems very confident. He's very confident about the idea one and done rule. Any changes to the one and done rule is advantage Calipari, right? Advantage Kentucky basketball. And maybe he is in fact right about that. My thing is, if you change the one and done rule, exactly what are you trying to accomplish? Right? Because the NBA is not changing the one and done rule, and as much as college fans will continue to rejoice about this. They're not changing the one and done rule to protect the integrity of college basketball. And Adam Silver is a very good guy, but let's be honest. Adam Silver's not that nice. You don't get to be commissioner of a whole sport by being a nice guy, right? You might be friendly and you might be kind, but there's a level of ruthless down there because that's the only way you get up to that point. Adam Silver is not so generous that he wants to protect the integrity of college basketball. So this one and done change that is being proposed has nothing to do with protecting the integrity of the sport, which, by the way, the integrity of college basketball has not been damaged at all. And in fact, I think has become more exciting since we've had the one and done rule. Because yes, you've got a lot of one and done players who show up for 1 year and jump to the NBA. But there are also guys who, because they're not in the shadow of a lot of these talented guys who maybe would have stayed at college a little bit longer, they get to extend their careers. And they get a chance to shine. And they get a chance to maybe make it to the NBA. Not only that, but a lot of them maybe don't get to go to Kentucky and Duke and Syracuse. So a lot of these guys wind up going to a lot of these mid-major schools that cause upsets all the time. Some of these guys end up going to St. Mary's. And some of these guys wind up going to Villanova, who won the title a couple of years ago. So you see it happening where players may not necessarily be a first rounder if they come out to the NBA, but they stick around and they get a lot of attention, right? I don't think, though I could be wrong about it, we necessarily would have found how good a basketball player C.J. McCollum is with the Blazers if C.J. McCollum didn't get the opportunity to go all 4 years in college without being overshined by a bunch of very talented other guys who are now staying 2, 3, 4 years in. Because can you imagine Anthony Davis if he's in Kentucky for like 3 years? How beastly Kentucky is? Or if Coach K would have been able to keep any of his guys for more than a year? Can you imagine that? Because that would have been crazy. But no, C.J. McCollum went to Lehigh University, put on a show, upset Duke, and got himself a lot of draft attention. I don't see the one and done rule as being bad for college sports. I think there's pros and cons to all of this stuff. And you have to see what the upside of what the one and done has done, which is it's given a lot of mid-major colleges a chance to compete in a way that maybe before they didn't, because we're seeing more of these schools upset in a way that they have not, because they counter a lot of the talent that bigger schools are getting, right? That Duke is getting Kyrie Irving and Jahlil Okafor. Kentucky's getting Anthony Davis and John Wall. And you get to counter all of those guys with players who are going to develop. They're going to be there for 4 years. It's a little bit of a situation where men are playing against boys a little bit. And you take advantage of that. You gain some extra college experience. And you learn how to win. I mean, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. And I think that is something that we're going to lose some of if you change this rule. And I'm not even saying that that's bad for college basketball. But let's not act like one and done was only negative. It ruined college basketball. It ruined the NBA when it didn't. When we got a lot of really great NBA players out of one and done. And I think we got a lot of great college basketball out of one and done also. It changed the landscape of the sport. And yeah, anytime you change these rules, there are going to be unintended consequences of the sport. There absolutely are going to be. And so, yeah, coaches are a little bit worried with how it is that this is going to change. Because once it changes, the coach that figures out what this rule change means first, that person will be successful. That is part of the success of John Calipari, is that John Calipari figured out first that if we're going to have a requirement for guys to spend at least 1 year in college, then guess what? I am going to take advantage of this. I am going to go and tell those guys, look, my job is not to get you a title in college. My job is to get you into the NBA. And I alone can do this. And then he goes out there and he gets it done. And he hustles for these guys. And he does get guys in the NBA. And that, in turn, gives him more credibility the next time he makes that pitch to another guy. Because now he can go to them and say, look at the guys I've got in the NBA. I've got Anthony Davis and Karl Anthony Towns and John Wall and Boogie Cousins and Rajon Rondo. And the list goes on forever for this guy, right? And Derrick Rose. And like all these guys, look at all these guys I've put in the NBA. And I could put you in the NBA too. And he does that. He goes out every single time and he does it. The coach that figures out what a rule change means in terms of getting an edge, the coach that does this first, he's the guy that's going to be successful. And I understand that there are coaches that are a little worried about this because you might be worried that you're not the guy that figures it out. You might be worried that the entire landscape of college basketball shifts underneath your feet and you don't understand what to do in order to be successful fast enough to keep your job. It's scary, right? Like when you look at a team like Duke, you get to be safe if you're Coach K, right? Coach K did not get on the one and done thing early, but he did it eventually. And he's Coach K, so he is allowed to maybe not adopt it first, but get there eventually. Most guys do not get the opportunity to get there eventually. You got to get there early. And nobody wants to have that kind of arms race, man, going into all of this stuff. It's stressful. It's very, very stressful, as you can possibly imagine, right? You see it happen in the business world all the time. Anytime that there's an innovation, anytime the government changes a law, if you're the business that figures out how to exploit it first, you win. And everyone else is eating your dust and trying to figure out how to catch up to you. That's the only way that any of this stuff works. And if you don't figure it out, well, then that's it. And it's a constant arms race going on. So, yeah, I can see how some coaches could be hesitant about changing the rules, but it is the NBA's rule to change. And like I said, Adam Silver, maybe he's a nice guy, but he's not that generous. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. So between the last time the Florida and Georgia met, a lot of things have changed. The last time they met, the Gators beat Georgia 24-10. It looked like we were worried about Kirby Smart last year. I remember last year there was some talk that people were saying, well, we've got to give him a chance. But, man, it didn't look good to start, right? Because Kirby Smart took a team that was a perennial 10-game winner, and they didn't win 10 games. And you were worried about him. But week after week, things have changed. And in just 1 year, Georgia is a 14-point favorite going into Florida. They're the more experienced team. They're the more mature team. They've got 10 starters on defense. They've got 7 on offense. They're the team that looks like the team to beat. And that's such a big change. That's such a big change. Because it looked like Florida had figured it out, in my opinion. Last year, Florida, I think with the upset in the division, in winning the East over Tennessee, who did in large part give it away. I think Florida showed us a lot that they figured it out. And I was saying it all summer. I think that Jim McElwain is the kind of coach, he's an offensive coach. That's what they brought him in to be, even though they have struggled powerfully on offense. They brought him in to be an offensive coach. And Jim McElwain has not had, I think, a solid quarterback since he had Will Grier for 5 games? He had Will Grier for exactly 5 games. And that was the best that Florida ever looked as an offensive unit. And I think that, yeah, one day they are going to get a lot out of Felipe Franks, because I think he's a very talented guy. I like his arm strength, man. Like, it's just, he checks all of the boxes that when you say, okay, this guy is a quarterback you can build around. He checks all of the boxes. He's a young guy. He's mobile. He's got arm talent. You know, I mean, he does need to work on his accuracy and vision, but he is a freshman. So, I mean, like, I don't know what anybody expected there. You just needed to get Jim McElwain a quarterback. And I thought that maybe Malik Zaire was going to be the answer for Florida moving forward. And that was nothing like that happened, right? None of the quarterbacks have really taken the reins, right? Felipe Franks looks very often like a freshman, right? Like very, very few guys come in as freshmen and just handle the job that way. Felipe Franks looks very much like a freshman in an offense where he can't do what Jake Fromm is doing at Georgia. Jake Fromm doesn't have to be the offense because Georgia can run the ball better than anybody in the SEC East. Between Michelle, between Chubb, between Holyfield, they have a three-headed monster in their backfield. They can run the ball just about better than anybody there. And so, yeah, Jake Fromm doesn't have to come out, and he can play like a freshman. He can make big-time throws when they need him to make big-time throws. And then you look at the stat sheet, and Jake Fromm's only thrown, 12, 13 passes. They don't rely on him because they don't need him. Florida needs Franks to be elite, and he can't be because he is a freshman. He is simply a freshman quarterback, and he was thrown to the wolves. Jim McElwain, who a lot of belly aching was made. He made a lot of belly aching this summer to get a rule change that would allow Malik Zaire to be able to transfer in as a graduate transfer to the University of Florida. And I thought, well, there's your answer, a quarterback. And I don't know if it's McElwain. I don't know if it's Zaire. I don't know who it is that is ruining this situation. Whether Zaire's not doing enough to get out on the field or McElwain's just not interested in the guy, but something is wrong. When you have a graduate transfer, there's a rule change that has to happen for you to have this graduate transfer. He comes over, and from basically training camp on, you don't give the guy a second look. And I know Malik Zaire had his struggles at Notre Dame, but the guy wasn't bad from what I recall. I recall that the guy played a number of games very well. But for whatever reason, and Florida can't get on the field. Can't. It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy to me. Malik Zaire cannot get on the field for Florida. And that is the one position that Jim McElwain needs to look anything like a reasonable and or competent coach. I'm amazed that Florida's defense has been as dominant as it has been his entire time there. It is mind-boggling. Offensive coach comes in, can't get the offense going. The defense is good. It's perplexing that there hasn't been anything in the way of a Florida offense that has looked respectable his entire time there. Right? And this is why we forever float Jim McElwain's name around in hot seat conversations, even though his seat is clearly not the hottest seat. Because how do you explain an offensive-minded guy not getting his offense going? What is the rationale? What reason could you come up with that that's ever okay? Because I can't come up with many. That's what they brought you in to do, right? And that is one major difference between Florida and Georgia. And what's changed? Georgia brought in Kirby Smart to make Georgia more like Alabama. They brought him in to make Georgia defensively sound, to make them a better defensive squad. Well, the offense under Kirby Smart this year has excelled. But the defense has gotten better too. That's what's important. Right? And that's a main struggle with a lot of these coaches, right? Like the main struggle with Kevin Sumlin is an offensive guy. And throughout Kevin Sumlin's time as Texas A&M head coach, the Aggies have struggled offensively. Gus Malzahn is an offensive guy. And throughout his time as Auburn head coach, Auburn has struggled mightily. And I don't know if these guys are aware that that's what they brought you in here for. They didn't just bring you in to win. If you're an offensive guy, they brought you in to fix the offense. Right? Gus Malzahn's another one of those guys, just didn't have a quarterback. Was able to go out there, was able to get Jarrett Stidham. Stidham's been good for them. They're 5-2. Good for them. Good for them. But that is incredible. You're looking at Jim McElwain, and he is not even close to having this offense constructed to a level that it needs to be. Now, you could say, well, look at all the suspensions this year. They lost Antonio Callaway. who is their best player, I think, by far. They lost Jordan Scarlett. I mean, they lost pieces. But you lost pieces because your players were involved in fraud. So that speaks to some level of a lack of institutional control. You brought in guys who thought they could get a school credit card, pretend to lose it, get another one, and have 2 credit cards. That's what they thought was going to happen. And it wasn't just one guy or 2 guys. It was 7 players on your football team. So yes, if your offense is suffering as a result of that, that still does not reflect on you well as the head coach of a football team. It doesn't. I mean, this absolutely boggles the mind. The gap between Georgia and Florida. Georgia was behind Florida last year. Now, Georgia's better than Florida, and it's not close. At all. At all. Kirby Smart is everything advertised and more, and Jim McElwain looks like he might be in trouble. Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. World Series Game 1 tonight. Tonight, I think I'm gonna go Dodgers. I'm gonna go Dodgers. Yasiel Puig, he's ready. He showed up to the stadium. His hair is blue because, of course, it is. I'm gonna go Dodgers. It's going to be a tough one. I'm going to go Dodgers tonight. See how that takes us. Clutch with Keon Rose at 92.7 FM, NoogaRadio.com, and Nooga Radio. Remember, folks, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch, and I'll see you in 24 hours.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.